buy this knowing that nothing was wrong with the building. There will be some elements of the building that have to be addressed. We're not looking to spend $400,000 on any kind of repairs. It's not going to happen, as far as I'm concerned. What we need to do is fix the things that need to be repaired and then to get it open as soon as possible. But the unfortunate part about what's being said by some publicly is that it would discourage someone who may be thinking about booking an event with us at that club that we now own, would maybe discourage them from calling and saying, hey, listen, I want to have a tournament this summer. Can you schedule us? Because of the uncertainty that's intentionally being spread out there about this by disparaging remarks that rise to the level of, wow, electric problems. What are we going to do? Well, we have an electric department, don't we, Mr. Mix, I think? The other people that are competent in the city that are able to handle these things. And what we can't do ourselves, we can actually, yeah. Mr. Lundy will fix these things. There's a $100,000 contingency fund that was put aside out of the money that we've already paid him that he doesn't have access to until they are addressed. All right, that means carts, batteries, all of the things that have been raised as concerns that the public doesn't know. And so, when I said before about misinformation, what I meant by that is that you can tell somebody one thing and have them focus on that, but not tell them all the adjectives that are also involved in understanding that one thing and how that was done this time for it to rise to the level that it has, is that you focus people's attention on it's costing $3.4 million to buy a building and a golf course. That's not all we bought. That's all that was understood by most or many, because it wasn't allowed at the time for us to go out and explain what else was involved, what else we were getting, and how could you even put a price on how much that property is worth to the city residents for the next 150 years that have belonged to us. What Mr. Mix and our staff and people that we have working on this, and all of us that are going to be involved, can actually come up with for ideas to make it better, to make it successful, all right? It's an all hands on deck. And unfortunately, we do not have all hands on deck right now. And that's unfortunate, because if that were the case, we wouldn't be facing this constant headwind about the whole thing, all right? So that's what I wanted to say about that. And so I will be talking about this Wednesday and explaining how it all started, why it was the way it was, what the developers faced, what we faced, what we were looking at, and why I made the decision. I can't speak for the other council members here that did. Just real quickly, Mr. Trainer, the golf course is a much better deal than many people understand, and I think in time it will be understood. Tammy, I want to thank you for coming tonight and talking about your circumstances. I'm glad to see it. Abandoned buildings in the town, I've talked to code enforcement, and they are, there's a list that I want to see what we can do if it involves a land bank possibly or something. Brian, the abandoned houses, huge problem with creating affordable housing when they're empty like they are for the years that they are, and then we have destruction of apartments. It's discouraging investors from building more affordable housing. It's no question in my mind. It's one of the biggest issues we have right now. Robert, how can Watertown be greater? I ask myself that every day I got up in the morning before when I look at the things that I'm facing and what we're trying to do here. So I want you to know, I can't speak for everyone else, but there's something I'm concerned about. And I want to say this, there's so many other things, I could, go on, as you know, I could go on for an hour, right? But I will say this, back in 2006, when this below market lease was passed in this city council chamber, the way they framed the actual lease that was, I would say, $60,000 less that year than what it should have been, all right? And every year since then has been. The amount of money that was not given to, because that would be incorrect, not collected is more correct, from the club to keep it viable, to keep it open. Parking that was given to the club, free of charge, that was on city parkland, right? Okay, no problem with parking on a blade of grass. Well, there was a problem. We had a deed restriction that prevented it, and we jeopardized the park as a whole. There's no statute of limitations on that. I've looked it up many places, despite what we got for legal advice as to, yeah, that was okay. But the way they framed this below-market lease back then in 2006, it was given to the course up here and the golf course. This is before Mike Lundy, so I want to make this clear. Lundy was a beneficiary of what was left of that lease, the 20-year lease, but there was 3 years left in the 2000. I think it was 2000 to 2009, and there was 3 years left in it because Mr. Samayo bought the course in 2007. And so because there were 3 years left on that lease, they decided to extend the lease another 20 years, so they gave them a total of 23 years to have a below-market lease. And at the time the resolution was introduced to the public, it was introduced in this way. In order to enhance the recreational opportunities in Thompson Park, sounds nice, doesn't it? But what it ended up being was that it was a subsidy by not collecting what you could have collected on that property over all these years to keep a certain golf course open. And it was okay to have done it that way, all right? But now there's a problem because the city council, the majority, has decided to buy the course outright, so we own it. So we're no longer facilitating development in our city by subsidizing private developers and helping them keep their doors open. It's a more honest way to approach this. And I will say that, in closing, that each one of these renewals of this lease, I went back through all the way back to 1965. I have a copy of that lease agreement. Just so you know, from 1965 until 1985, there was a lease in place for 20 years. And they were talking about, well, we wanted to give them a below-market price on the property up there for the 66 acres that the city leases to the golf club in order for them to develop what was essentially at that time farmland. And it was. All right, for 20 years, from 65 to 85. The price for the lease of the 66 acres from the city of Watertown was $300 a year. Now, I think 20 years is probably adequate amount of time for you to develop a golf course. But then it remained low, and it became a subsidy. And then what burned me, and in 2017 I ran for, and why I ran on Golfgate and getting this taken care of, because we had a group of people that were willing to continue that offset, that subsidy. It wasn't so much that they were doing that, but what they did with it once it was understood. And I understood it because I called it back in 2017 a bailout of what they were planning to do. And I'll get into that on Wednesday. The one problem that I had with it is after they gave this big subsidy to this golf course, which was privately owned and run, they turned around and said, we don't have the money to maintain the pools for the children in the city. We don't have the money to rebuild the Thompson Park pool, okay? And so they were giving this wealthy group of people who owned this club and shareholders a huge subsidy off what it would have cost them to run that club. And it wasn't run well because it really was in financial trouble in 2017. And we were going to buy the land and pay off their debt and lease it back to them for another 25 years. That was what the plan was. We didn't do that because I stood up and said, I don't think it's right. It's Golfgate. And where we are right now is that these same people think what we did, well, they wanted you to think that what we did was wrong, what I did, personally, what I decided. And all along, what they were doing was preventing the city from having the money on this lease that could have been collected to pay for the amenities that would have benefited the majority of people in the city. And they were denying the people in the city the money, all right, that they could have used to fix a pool, to maintain the pools, and to hire lifeguards. And they came out hypocritically and said, we don't have the money for the things that the people want, but they did have the money to underwrite the golf course operation for all of those years, over and over. And the mayor, you voted on this twice for that below-market lease. In 2000 and 2006.
It was a yes vote, too.
It was what?
I voted yes twice.
Yes. You voted for the subsidy.
There's no monies given to the golf.
No, that's clever. No money was given, but money was not collected. That should have
It's not
been.
true either.
Well, it is true.
There was lease
Well,
money and taxes
you know what?
collected.
We're all gonna have,
Your
we're gonna understand what's been done over
Get
this
to my
course of
time.
time. You've had your chance for the last 7 weeks on the radio and every other thing to go out and explain to people. Now's my time, and I'm no longer restricted by a lawyer about keeping me from talking. And I'm gonna talk, because it is an election year this year. All right, and that's all I got for tonight, folks. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
You acted like you said, I'm going to talk. I thought you had,
Oh, more?
no,
No, I
that's
think you had
okay.
enough. That's enough. I'll talk then.
I wanted to